Welcome back. Okay, I think it's time for us to now actually fetch some data. So let's actually take a look at the data we want to fetch. To my eye, I can see two things that we might want to do. Some of the times we want to get a single record that we can easily identify. Some of the times we want to get multiple records. When we do multiple, we want them all to have the same partition key. So yeah, that should be pretty easy to do. Let's go back into Visual Studio here, and let's start off with the single record. Now to fetch a single record, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say that I need two parameters specified by the caller. One is the entity, and the other one, and I'm just making up these names, is ID. I could have called these, if I wanted to, I can call it PK and SK. And maybe that makes sense. In my mind, though, this is really entity and ID. Okay. Next up, we actually want to fetch our data from Dynamo itself. Let me grab some example code for this. Pretty easy. The main thing is this: we're going to go to DynamoDB, perform a get operation. Get operation returns a single record. We need to pass parameters. The parameters we're going to fill out in a second. Also, we're converting this. So one thing about the get operation, this is kind of it's not really new stuff. The original get operation used callbacks. Because this is an asynchronous function, and it would call those callbacks when it's done. The more modern thing to do is to work with promises. So that's why we add .promise, and that converts this to this converts this to a promise. Cool. And a promise is something that we can await. So let's continue on and fill in the missing bits. Table name. Where do we find your table name? When I go over here. Portfolio table. So according to this, in our Lambda function, we actually have an environment variable called portfolio table. So when this runs in Lambda, we should have access to that environment variable. So to do that, I need to say process dot env dot, and then that's the environment variable. So this is a Node.js thing. Anytime you want to access an environment variable, that's the way you do it. Now, interestingly, this will only be set up, at the moment, we're having our serverless architecture. When it deploys it makes sure that's set up. But if we run locally, it's not actually set up. So I'm going to fix that right now. So we're going to go into our run locally. And we're going to say, hey, if you're running locally, the name of your portfolio table is, and I'll just hard code that, it is dev portfolio. Okay? And I could do something a little more elaborate to actually pull this from somewhere else, but this is basically a simple way of running this locally. I think that's good enough. So let's go back to our handler, fill in the next missing bits. So we got the table name. Now we need the PK and SK. Well, the PK is basically this entity, and the SK is going to be this ID. So let's do that. So how do we get access to the entity parameter that's being passed into this function? That's part of the request. So it's req dot params dot, and then just whatever name I came up with. In this case, it was entity. And for this one, same thing. req dot params dot and dot ID. Sweet. That looks pretty good. Okay. So this looks like what I need to fetch the record. This looks okay. Now I need to actually, well, two things. We need a little bit of error handling in case something goes wrong. And we also need a bit of actually returning. So let's do the returning first. So assuming everything goes right, we need to have a response that says, hey, here's your data. So that's as simple as res.json. And what's the data? Well, I think it's going to be, that should say record, not records. Record dot, and I believe the parameter, I just want to return the payload. I don't think we really want to return the PK and the S key, so we'll just return the payload portion. That's an arbitrary decision, but that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say payload. Okay, that looks good to me. What about error handling? Well, if we don't find a record, it actually will not throw an exception. I think it will return a null record. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say if record. So if the record is truthy, then that's our success. That's this guy right here. So if record is truthy, then we return success. Else it's basically going to be a not found kind of situation. So I'm going to say res.status 404, which I think is not found, and give it a little more information, JSON, give it an object with message. I'll just say record not found. I could also pass information about what the record was, but that's good enough for me. Lastly, as long as we're being thorough, what if this were to throw an exception? So what if it, when we await it, when you await something, you could get a response, or you could get a, it may say, nah, nothing. So we're going to wrap the whole thing in a try catch. So this is just our very last fallback. Basically, if the code blows up and we don't know why, we're going to say 500. It's some kind of a server error. And for message, I'll say unexpected, because it is unexpected, exception. And might as well pass that across. I don't mind leaking a little detail here. Great. Looks pretty good. I'm going to try running it. So let's hit the old F5. And it blew up right away. Okay. I think I know why, actually. I think it's this await state. Yeah, this looks right. It's await. But here, let me show you how to find that out. So I tried to run it in the debugger and immediately closed down and didn't give us a lot of information. So instead, I'm just going to try to run it from the command line here. I'm going to say node, and what was it trying to run? I was trying to run locally.js. So I'll just say run locally.js. I certainly hope it's that await, otherwise I'll look kind of silly. Ah, it was the await. Good. Right. So yeah, this is telling us, hey, buddy, you got an await keyword here, and it's not inside of an async function. What's that all about? Well, if we look at this, this guy right here is not an async function, but it can be. So that's one nice thing. This particular framework will allow us to basically say, here's the endpoint, here's the function that handles it, and it is okay to say that is an async function. So I can just put the word async here, and that should fix it. So now I hit F5. Ooh, now it's running, hasn't stopped. I kind of want to clear this because it's ugly, but it's running. You can see it up here. Let's hit it with the postman. So first, yeah, that's right. So we said portfolio, and now I want portfolio main. Unexpected exception. Okay, so it's making it into our endpoint. That's nice. We did get an unexpected exception. If we go back to good old Visual Studio, since we're running it locally, we might get a little more information about what went wrong. And more importantly, we can actually put a breakpoint here and here. So let's actually just hit that again. So it made it to this point. I'm going to run. Now, what's the error? DynamoDB client is not defined. I'm surprised I didn't guess that one. Okay. So, yeah, of course, I never actually imported the DynamoDB client. So now we can go, yeah, what do we need to do that? Go up here, and we need two lines. We need this. We need AWS SDK, and then once we have the AWS SDK, we can create the DynamoDB client. I've also hard-coded the region. I said US West 2. You know, in a real production project, you probably never hard-code the region. You would instead, you know, pass it in somehow, but that's good enough for me. Next up, I'm going to actually have to import AWS SDK. Sorry, I'm going to have to add the library. So let's do that. npm install AWS SDK. Nice. Okay, let's try running again. Oh, I'm already running. Hold on. Oh, yeah, I'm already running. Just a little ahead of myself. So it's running. Let's try this again. And we get to that point. Let's run. Oops. No. Just continue. Just continue. Not bad. Well, kind of not bad. We did get a response. It says 200, but I don't actually see a body. What does that mean? Well, it probably means that I didn't respond correctly. So let's just do this. Let's put our, I bet you, record. I know what I did wrong. Record is going to have an item, and the item's going to have the payload. But we'll see that more easily in the debugger. So let's actually call it again one more time. And this is why I wanted to be able to run locally, so I could see things like this. Record has got an item, and the item has got the payload. Nice. So what I really want to do here is more along the lines of this. I'll say record.item.payload. Now another thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to be a little pessimistic here. I'm assuming record's got an item. I'm assuming that item has a payload. Now, if worse were to come to worse, and I'm wrong on any of these, I'd actually like to just get back. I still would like a response back, and I'm okay with it actually saying undefined. So that's why I'm putting a couple of Elvis operators in there. So let's keep going. We're going to run again. Ooh, I'm feeling lucky. Let's try it again. Nice. So we now have the ability to get a single record back, and we were able to get our byline, title, username, URL, blah blah blah. So that looks pretty good. Now, what if we made a mistake, had a typo? In that case, oh, actually, I'm surprised. Actually, it returned a 200. Yeah, I'm actually quite surprised. I thought that it actually returned a record of undefined, but I bet you I bet you it actually returns item is undefined. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here and do it again. And we're just going to hover over. So record's actually defined, but the item it shouldn't have found anything. So I'm a little surprised here. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I called it correctly. My mistake. Item, yeah. We're adding some garbage here. We're trying to test the path where we have an invalid path. And correct. We get a response back, and the item itself is undefined. So that's kind of that's what our if statement should be. Now, we could also do a little digging and find out. I bet you in here there's something that says, oh, I wasn't able to find your record. But the simple thing for me is to do the following. I'm going to say that we're going to go in here if we've got a record and if record.item is also truthy. So we're only going to say we have success if we've got a record and if we have an item. Now, actually, that simplifies this statement here. I didn't need those weird Elvis operators anymore. So we're only going to go in here if we actually have an item, and otherwise we're going to go here. So let's call that not found. Excellent. That's exactly what we want to have happen. And good. Okay. Excellent. So it's working nicely now. All right. This one's dragging on for a little while, so I think I'll stop it here, and then we'll add the next endpoint, which can get multiple records for those other entities. Thank you.